Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the November 29th instance of the CNCF IoT Edge Working Group meeting. Today on the schedule agenda, all we have is discussing what we want to have our CFP be for the maintainer track submission for this working group. Other than that, we have an open discussion. People are free to add agenda items directly on the document. If you don't have edit access to that document, feel free to put those items in chat and we can go from there. But yeah, with that, I'll start us off with the discussion of the CFP. So in the past, one of the things for this past KubeCon we discussed is how, as a working group, can we present the work that we've been doing and at what capacity? And so there's kind of three options we have for that. One is a general CFP submission for KubeCon. So put your hat in the lottery with everyone else. The other option is the maintainer track submission. So that is using the runtime tag and submitting a maintainer track for that. You have much higher chances of getting accepted doing that method, and we've pretty much the majority of KubeCons have presented that way, and this past one was an exception to that. The third option is to submit for Edge Day, which I believe is happening again this year for KubeCon Europe. And so kind of focusing on that second track, we have pretty much exactly a month to submit that CFP. It's not due till December 31st. So just think of it as an end of the year deadline. And with that being said, it would be great to open the floor for a brainstorm of what we would want to submit for that CFP. I can go ahead and I guess throw a thought in because I know that Joel and I have talked about it, but essentially we could submit a talk about our latest white paper. And that could be something that would be a good follow-up to what Joel and Andy presented at the Runtime Tag meetup at KubeCon North America. So that would be one option. And then we always tag on to these maintainer track sessions, just kind of a update on the ecosystem. So we're kind of the liaisons of what it means to run Kubernetes on the edge. So in the past, we've started off with these are the projects in this space. This is a little bit what each does. Here's what we're focused on at the moment, and here's how you can participate. So that's one quick angle that we could go since we kind of already have that paper formulated.
Kate, I think that's a good idea, is to start there. Obviously, I think one of the things that would depend on where the submission would probably first start with what's the content, because not all the content would be ideal for all of the different potential places that it could be submitted to. So I think maybe leading the discussion content first around what we need to go out, and then that would feed right into the where it would go from there. I think I was looking through the last 6 months of talks, and a number of themes continue to come up around, I mean, obviously given the working group, around what people are doing around edges. And in the last few months, we have circled a bit on WebAssembly. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to do a WebAssembly and Kubernetes talk, and we could go through the different ways that people are doing this in cloud native. I think that was a theme that we saw at KubeCon coming out, where just more and more people running Wasm on Kates. So I think that is timely, and people are super interested in that. And I think we would want to start that with, the different types of edge, because everybody means something different. In the telco world, they mean like a big pop, like a whole little data center. But on this call, we've circled between the Linux devices and then the embedded devices, which obviously embedded's not going to run Kubernetes. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
And to piggyback off that, another option would be because my only concern with that would be that there is also, as you very clearly know, Liam, the WebAssembly working group within the runtime tag. So I think if we do that topic, we'd want to directly ask that working group if they would like to collaborate on it, which would be a very interesting talk to give, to basically have a representative from each working group co-present WebAssembly plus Kubernetes plus Edge. What does the story look like? I think that would be a very powerful story to give at KubeCon. Another option would be for both working groups, we could try to get that talk through the WebAssembly working group, and then also a separate one on this working group. But I don't know if the runtime tag only gets a certain number within it. So I can reach out to Ricardo to kind of get a sense of that,
Yeah.
of does each working group get one, or what's our best strategy here? So I'll actually ping him right now about that.
Yeah, I think I was on the WebAssembly working group this week, and I think you were too. I think that group, talks about so many broad issues. I think what we would bring to the table is focusing the content on Edge specifically. So I think I mean, like, you and I, we know everybody on that call really well. I'm sure that they would love to collaborate with us on this. This week, that for other people that weren't on that call this week, the main presentation was around WebAssembly registries, integrating with OCI, and then some additional conversations about the standards work that's happening now. There's a big standards vote scheduled tomorrow. It's a big deal to move the WebAssembly component model forward. I think they've got so much broad charter. I think we take the edge, and we could certainly pick up the IoT piece. Although, if we want to talk conflicts, there's also the Kubernetes on Edge day. So there's lots of people that I feel like are overlapping in the Venn diagram. We have to draw like 6 circles here to like tie it all together.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Liam, do you know if the WebAssembly working group is thinking of submitting a maintainer track talk already?
I have not heard, but I will ask, and they should. But I think there's there's so much scope that's outside of, like, the Edge specific story is so big that I don't think there's going to be any conflict there. Um, I should bump them because submissions need to be in by Sunday, right? Do
No, not
our submissions
till
are out?
yeah, it's not till it was last Sunday for general CFPs, but maintainer track we get a whole nother month. So we're good till
Okay.
December 31st.
The Wasm, just separately, the Wasm day and all the days CFPs for general submissions is this Sunday. So I know we've got a number of overlapping deadlines here. I was confused around the working group deadline. Well, that's good. If there's a month, we got plenty of time to coordinate that. And I think maybe what we should start is, if we want to do, we have talked about WebAssembly extensively on this call. If we want to do a WebAssembly and Kates together, which I would love, because there's so much great work in the space. I think what we should do is probably pull together a thread on Slack, and I can volunteer to do this if we want. Try to tag the leads and say, hey, here's Kubernetes on Edge Day, here's WebAssembly working group, here's IoT Edge. Let's maybe just collaborate and make sure that we're submitting things that work together, and versus competing. The better together story is always with WebAssembly.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I just reached out to Ricardo and he's pretty fast. So I think the first thing would be to know, in the past, I know they've only been allowed a certain number of talks per tag. So I think that's a really good starter to understand if that's still the case. So I reached out to him about that. Okay, so I think we like Liam kicked us off by saying let's talk about content. I think we've established for our maintainer track submission, WebAssembly plus Kubernetes plus Edge is a really solid point that might interest the group. Another is the white papers. Joel, did you have another thing you wanted to throw in the bucket there?
Just, Kate, it could be a combination. It could be, here's the working group, here's the paper. Liam, you mentioned defining what is edge. That's been in the past two papers. So start with that, if it's 30, 40 minutes, it's like 5-minute intro overview. Here's work that's out there, and then roll into I hate to use the word use case, an example or a discussion of, hey, here's WebAssembly within an edge on Kubernetes, because that might differentiate more from the Wasm on edge or Kubernetes on edge. Something like that. It could be a combination as my summary point.
I love that. I love that. I'm sure for those folks that had the opportunity to attend KubeCon this year, you noticed the big Sony booth right out front. And what I thought was amazing about that booth was not only did they have WebAssembly tagged out as a value prop, was one. Two, it was completely embedded use case. So there was no Kubernetes on their device. And I was like, well, this is KubeCon. I was like, what's going on here? I still loved it. And then they had a whole wall explaining WebAssembly. So I think maybe that could be the story. It could be, to the edge and beyond with Kubernetes. And we could basically take the slider and slide down from, and if we want to use WebAssembly, we could, slide from Kubernetes down to Kubernetes on an edge, down to an IoT edge without it. So that could be the story that we tell, and we could tease out, I imagine, a table here where we sort of delineate between those three different zones of where we could deploy to. Well, I'll get a thread on the CNCF Slack and tag the work group leads and the tech leads for the three related areas that we want to collaborate with: Kubernetes on Edge, WebAssembly working group, and then this group. And then we can pick up the discussion there, and just sort of align and just make sure that people feel invited to collaborate on that messaging. And then we could combine the white paper with the submission and go from there. I think that's a really strong submission.
And were you saying following up on that within the WebAssembly working group Slack there? Or
we can.
sorry.
I think we'll tag
one.
the leads.
Yeah,
we'll tag the leads, and just make sure that they are aware and that they can sort of say they have awareness of what we'd like to do, and then we can also discover and make sure that we're not stepping on any plans that they have. I think that they may probably take the whole WebAssembly and Kubernetes piece. If I were them, that's what I would do, because there's been so much work that's happened there that story should be told. I'll certainly suggest that to them, and then that would very naturally complement what we want to do, which is that piece out to the edges, and IoT.
Cool. And I think framing that with maybe the tone of we're ideating this, because I also want to see if Steve and Dehan have thoughts about it, given that they've given so many maintainer track submissions as well. But yeah, I think that story sounds like a good one and interesting. I'm curious, Moyo, Leon, Victor, any thoughts on that story? On whether, as someone who's interested in the edge space, would that be an appealing, if you're looking at the KubeCon schedule, is that one that you would think to click on and find interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Definitely WebAssembly, I think, is taking off especially on the edge devices side. My question is more on the infrastructure side. Is that what's going on? So the biggest problem, I know it's not in KubeCon, but I'm not sure you're aware of, there's actually a new initiative to move the so-called CNF group within the CNCF side to, I guess, to the RF network side. Basically, what's happening is originally big tech telcos has been building their own cloud a network infrastructure using virtual machines, and then container, and then now WebAssembly. So the problem is there's a lot of products that's built, but not integrated or sort of being used. So that this is already happening. So I think there will be at least on the device side, definitely I think WebAssembly is going to take off. But for the actual infrastructure side, what's going to happen? And because integration is the biggest problem. I don't know, is it already happening on the WebAssembly side? Like if you build a new solution that's targeted not only on the device side, but more on the infrastructure side, how does it play with the current the 5G, the edge computing infrastructure, which is built even with virtual machine? So what's going to happen there? That's my question.
Just to clarify, by device side, do you mean embedded devices, or do you mean just smaller IoT devices? If you're thinking the node, like infrastructure side being how to reschedule WebAssembly on a node in the Kubernetes story, there are ways to do that are namely there's a container dshim for scheduling WebAssembly on Kubernetes, but yeah, integrating with Telecom provider stacks, I haven't personally seen like a POC of that, but I know Liam has more experience working with some network providers on this potentially.
The Telecom group, I'm aware of the LF work that they're doing over there, and I think that is a cool effort to sort of like kick that off. They originally had a cloud native telecom group, and it kind of died on the vine. So this is an effort to reestablish that. The telco providers have their own version of the CNCF. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. That's called TK Forum. And in TK Forum, WebAssembly was featured in this last one that they did, which was in Copenhagen. I'll drop a link to this here as soon as I can find it. And what's interesting is that they're actually building with WebAssembly, and they love it. They just released a big POC that they did, and they are working on a white paper in the CNCF now for that. That'll be from Vodafone and I think Orange and a couple of other telcos have put their fingerprints on that. So I think they're excited, and I think they're good partners. And if you know the telco world, 90 or maybe not 90, 60% of it is still just pizza boxes you buy from vendors. You buy your Ericsson pizza box, you buy your Nortel pizza box, and you just sort of plug these things in together, and that's most of the networks. But the telcos are definitely understand that the future is coming, and they're building in that they're building in that direction. Yes, I will put that in the meeting notes.
Yeah,
hey, Liam, sorry, Victor, I think I just put Victor, what you alluded to, I just put a link in our announcement in November of that Linux Foundation and Telecom. Combining telecom initiatives. Sorry, I cut you off, Victor.
Sorry, it's TM Forum.
That is the one. Yeah, I mentioned. Yeah. So the TM Forum, is that kind of a not closed source, but it's kind of telco only meeting? Is that community?
It's telco and all their vendors and interested parties. It's we've only just started to explore it ourselves, and it feels very much like the CNCF. It's a little bit more focused. Like the board is like if you look at who is on the board, it's like the CIO of Vodafone. So one of the things that they do there is they collaborate on creating open source projects. So the one that I just linked, I can share my screen if I've got permission. If I can get permission, I'll share my screen real fast, or if somebody wants to share that TM Forum link that I put in there. One of the things that they've done is they do like collaborative projects that they build out together. So in this particular one that's featured here on TM Forum, they are building 3 different deployments here. This is the group of folks that were building it. But the first one is a 5G converged charging infrastructure, which in the telco world, that's like, how many minutes do I have for this device, shared billing plans, stuff like that. and then what they call their ODA components, which is their open digital architecture. So that's like common telco services. So you can dig in this, and I think everybody, I think this is public here, so you can look at their presentations. But they are incredibly excited about WebAssembly, and they have let us know privately. They haven't announced it publicly. I don't think it's a big deal, but they are doing a phase 2 of this where they're expanding it out with a larger group of folks. So they're friendly. They would love to come and chat with us. We we asked them if they would do the case study in the CNCF because they do use Kubernetes. So there's a lot of work here that's there. Today they're primarily running on Linux, but they do understand that this can eventually hit the embedded use case eventually.
Okay, yeah, this seems to be the most interesting development that's going on. How this TM format is going to work with CNCF and how that new initiative is going to work, and especially there's so many open source projects that's kind of mature already, but nobody, I don't say nobody's using, but it's very not how to say not kind of production ready integrated. So I think the integration is probably the key, and how to move the new WebAssembly solutions into the existing black what's called Peter box existing black box solutions and versus machine based versus container based world. How it's going to happen smoothly without disrupting their existing business model. I think that's an interesting area.
I think it's like a lot of things. It's already happening. You look at Ring Central or the virtual telcos that are out there. There is a whole already group of upstart telco providers that are eating traditional telco providers' lunch, and it's just moved so fast and continues to move so fast. The telcos are I think the smart telcos are paying attention and are in cloud native. They show up at the CTO summit. They're at lots of events and they are listening, and I think they've got budgets to make a difference here and really change. We partner with some of them and really enjoy working with them.
Yeah, I don't have further comment at this point.
So I think one other topic I was interested, well, first want to check if there are other thoughts around CFPs, and like Liam mentioned, this can also be a time for people to brainstorm ideas for Edge Day. If you are interested in collaborating with someone else on the call or looking for someone who's an expert in something, this might be a good group to ask about. But I guess I'll just ask that before I throw out another topic idea. One thing that I was curious is I wanted to get some feedback around just these meetings in general and the focus of the working group. In the past, I guess, couple sprints, we could say, of like KubeCons, we've been focusing on kind of white papers to help orient people around what it means to build edge and applications and build up kind of the vocabulary around it. And I was curious, as a working group, do we want to keep going the white paper route? And if so, what would be a next one? Do we want to shift into trying to do something more project-based or kind of reference use case scenarios? I'm curious if people have ideas on how you want to use these times. We obviously always find a way to kind of fill a birds of feather discussion, but just wanted to status check on that.
I think it'll be interesting since we have you and Liam already WebAssembly expert. Maybe go into how to make WebAssembly integrate into the the telco ecosystem smoothly. I think that'll be an interesting topic.
My only question with that is should that exist in this working group, I guess. We've in the past really wondered about this working group's relationship with a lot of the telco workloads because there is kind of the near edge or network edge there that it is a part of that story. But there is question of how much of an overlap it is with this specific working group.
As far as I know, this is probably the most proper meeting for group. The reason is for example, the CNF group is focused on more Kubernetes, and then on the edge side, there's some WebAssembly blueprint initiative on the Earth Edge side, but I don't think it's as active. So I think, yeah, I cannot think of any other meeting that's more active regarding this topic. Somewhere in the TM forum, there are things which is kind of closed, so I'm not sure.
I think topically, just to throw another idea out that's closely related is, when we talk about the difference between Edge using Linux, I think we've got a lot of expertise here in this room and our call. An area where I would love to see where I think we could bring up some interesting content might be the embedded use case. We could invite Sony to come and talk about what they're doing with, if they were at KubeCon, their members, we could invite them on the call to do a presentation about how they're building, their embedded edge stuff. I know that's not Kubernetes, but they were at Cloud Native. We could ask if they have what is their Cloud Native and Kubernetes story, and I would be really curious about that. From what they've presented previously, I believe it's Whammer, which is another Bytecode Alliance WebAssembly engine. It stands for the WebAssembly micro runtime, but it is a really tiny WebAssembly runtime that they're using on that host. So, but I would be curious about how much they'll share and talk about that in how does it connect to cloud native context, and what's their story there. So that may be just another topic that we could just invite outside experts to come in and discuss what they're doing, because it has been a sticking point for us as a team and a community to sort of say, we'll define the edge. We end up swirling on that a little bit, but maybe getting some clear definition around, uses Linux, doesn't use Linux, like pure embedded would be a good delineation for us.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Just like the public cloud vendor is not moving to containers, right? Public cloud vendor is still using virtual machine. So there will be roles that virtual machine and container play. So the biggest problem is where and what. So I think by talking about integrations and standard, just like, for example, CNF is talking about how do you do standardized testing to make sure all the telco is following the cloud native best practices, right? So that's just basically on the Kubernetes world. But how to make the WebAssembly world also merge into the existing virtual machine, public cloud plus virtual machine plus that private cloud basically, and then plus container world. That's an interesting topic, at least to me.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
have an opportunity. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Joel.
No, I was just going to say, Victor and Liam, what you were talking about are the different components. I don't have an answer here, but just the idea of how do you build a system that goes from an embedded user edge up to like a little bit bigger that connects to feeds to a branch or small site compute within a user edge that then goes further upstream to like a service provider edge or to a cloud itself, but that more of an end-to-end system incorporating all these things. Something in that realm to figure out,
So for example, when you have all these different solutions, whether it's whatever edge it is and whatever function it plays, there need to be a way to automate the provisioning, backup recovery, and all that, right? So when we think about telco or any networking orchestration, ONAP is one big word. But when you actually talk to the individual projects, nobody seems to know. I mean, not would say nobody, but a lot of projects don't know how even integrate with own app. So the integration, so a lot of solutions that stand alone. So you can imagine for telco like Vodafone, that's why they probably want to have their TM forum, because there's so many solutions out there, but they don't work together, right? So that's why the integration is a key word. And same thing for WebAssembly, since it's such a disrupting technology, how to merge that into already evolving virtual machine / container, or how is that going to evolve more smoothly, and where it. I'm sure WebAssembly is not for all these cases. Where does virtual machine play? Where does container play? I think that's an interesting topic.
Yeah, so I think there are I'm hearing kind of two words for integration, and I want to clarify which one we're aimed at or if it's both. There's one that is integrating with one part of the edge. So it's kind of what do I use for each part of the edge? And there's another that's like, I want a spanning integration. So I want one solution that I can take from service provider edge to user edge to public cloud and back down and kind of swing it and have one solution for that. Is there one that we're targeting exploring, or is it both?
I think it probably need to be both. But there are two layers of it, right? One is infrastructure. One is the actual business. It's business application. Right now, most of the WebAssembly is playing in the upper layer, the application tier, not the infrastructure, such as database and all that. That's still even virtual machine, not even bare metal, not even virtual machine sometimes. So, but in order for it to at least from a telco perspective, I mean, because I used to work for telco, so I know a little bit. So for the whole thing to work seamlessly, they really need to talk to each other, and it's a huge effort to build a telecom company based on the whole stack. So the integration is beyond just the app tier or infrastructure tier. It's all kind of a all the whole full stack thing.
I think one thing that would be useful would be kind of a dichotomous key of sorts, that shows what tooling exists in the ecosystem. So it's kind of like, hey, where do I want to run this? Well, I mean, it could even start with, is WebAssembly an application? Is it a plugin? Like, what is it in my scenario? And then from there, it's like, where do I want to run this? Do I want to run this on an embedded device? Do I want to run it on a service provider? Do I want to run it in the public cloud? And then we keep moving down this dichotomous key until you're left with your tools that you have in this ecosystem. I think that would be something that would be helpful to people as a start, at least, because one point of feedback that I've gotten a lot in this space is what tool is out there and what should I use for my specific scenario. And sometimes I find it takes like 30 minutes into the conversation to finally understand what someone actually needs. So if we had like a kind of a resource tree that could help point people to where they needed what, we then might be able to easily jump off that into finding kind of bundles of these resources that fit scenarios.
I think that's where the Liam's discussion with the TM forum. I think that's really the probably where the source will come from, because the telcos are really the big customers of open source in this area.
I think they are a big adjacent community for sure. I don't think that they are. I think if we right now we would tag them out just under from a CNCF perspective, they'd be end users, like banks and other groups. I don't think that the telcos are as nearly as big of users as what we see in some of like financial services or some of the other things yet. But I think they certainly have ambitions to be. I think they're just a little bit earlier in their journey. There are an incredible number of telco specific things that are out there. I think that maybe the key, Kate, that you were talking about, I love that idea. That would be a great idea to bump over to this CNCF and LF networking group maybe, and see because that feels very focused around telecom. Whereas here, I think we could talk about it as a use case, as an example, but I don't know that it should necessarily be the central theme of our work per se.
I think the other thing for the key that would be less related to the CNCF LF working group would be you could include things such as the container deshim if you're focused on just running WebAssembly applications or Wasm Cloud. And then you can move into more specific things like I'm interested in a runtime for embedded. You could say Whammer, or you could say a package solution like Mitakura's solution with Sony. So that's kind of what I was thinking along that wouldn't be network related, but having something that is geared towards network related would be great. It sounds like we're almost becoming a consultancy. Like if that was something that we were passing off to the LF networking group, it would be like kind of giving our opinion on what edge solutions you need and what WebAssembly solutions fit in that. Which is an interesting angle to take, and it's kind of similar to the white paper of like disseminating information is our core motivation. But I think another option would be bootstrapping solutions.
Maybe a middle ground might be a kind of collaboration. For example, the about edge computing, I talked to who was that? I think it's Jason from IBM, who's the lead in on the RF edge side, and I had to talk with him one-on-one private conversation with him. So he's basically was wondering why we even separate this IoT edge group from the RF edge, because there's a lot of things that can collaborate better. Obviously, they focus more on the actual use cases, whereas here it's more about the fundamentals, how to build the infrastructure, and what new technology can be introduced to this area, to the IoT edge. So yeah, maybe on the RF side, there might be some discussion on actual integration and how to work, but how to make that happen, the actual foundational knowledge, technology, how to make the WebAssembly work together with container world, with virtual machine world, how to standard that API, that might need to be happen in both places.
Yeah, I think that may be a good way for us to participate in where we add value, and that's in line up with our charter. Well, it sounds like we've got some next steps for the submission. Are there Kate, or should we maybe try to brainstorm some other topic ideas or people we'd want to invite to speak? I had the two that I heard were maybe Sony, and if we wanted to have one of the telecoms come and present, those sound like maybe two topics that we would want to invite in to help prompt some discussion. Are there other groups or interesting orgs that we'd want to hear from? Should we invite the new LF folks, the LF and CNCF collaboration, to come and share their vision for what they'd like to accomplish or their roadmap? Those might be things that would be informative for us and the people that attend here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point in general, Liam, that this working group like a year ago, pretty much every other meeting had a presenter. And I think getting back to that cadence would be great. And so the ones you called out would be great to reach out to. Maybe I just want to write these down in the document. So we have Sony, Telecom,
Yeah,
this Wasm group, maybe the new LF group. Another option would be LF Edge to come and kind of give us an end of the year summary would be really fascinating. Are there other presenters that folks think would be great to hear from? Victor brought in a networking expert in the past, which was really interesting as well.
Larry Peterson, he's the CTO of Open Network Foundation. I think their stuff is already, there's actually a new foundation called Programmable Networking Project, I think it's called. They're basically incorporating the technology like P4 into the underlying networking. Yeah, so yeah, that's something that I think the telco is looking into. This is that's the problem. I think having the TM forum folks come in is probably the best because they're the actual users, so they'll know what technology is suitable for them to actually use in their actual production environment.
We are already working or chatting with Sony and the TM forum folks. So I can reach out to the two of them and ask them what their availability might be and then share that here. Or I could ask them just to add themselves to the schedule directly if we want. Does anyone have connections to the LF piece or would want to run those down?
I can reach out to the LF Edge group on end of the year summary. The new Telecom group I'm less connected to. So if anyone else wants to reach out to them, otherwise I can find a way to reach out to them. Cool. I'll take the Linux Foundation and rein them in and see if I can get them to come speak. Yeah, and this just as a general call to action for everyone is if you see new projects coming up in the open source or CNCF space, the reason I joined this working group is because the project I was working on, Ricardo, the runtime tag lead, like put up a GitHub issue on it saying that they were curious about what we were doing, wanted us to come speak. So I think it's a really cool way to bring projects into the CNCF ecosystem and maintainers and people. So if you see a project pop up, like maybe bring that to the meeting or put it in the Slack and we can try and reach out to them to get them to come present on what they're doing. Well, we can end 15 minutes early if folks don't have any other topics.
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone.